Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ask Better Questions, the podcast where we delve into the nuances of leadership and personal development. I'm your host Peter, and today we're going to explore the real cost of poor leadership. And by that I mean we're going to cover some of the direct and indirect costs to businesses and stakeholders at all levels. For those of you who are new here, I'm Peter Adams. I have over 20 years experience in leadership and consulting. I'm a published author and a speaker in the leadership space, and my mission here is to help excellent leaders become exceptional leaders through a better mindset. But before we start today's episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Colour4 Solutions. Colour4 Solutions offers leadership training for people who have reached a ceiling in their leadership journey and want to achieve more without dedicating substantial time and effort. The links to that are in the show notes. You can reach out to myself or David, my partner there. So, what are the costs of poor leadership, and why should we even care? Well, in business, we often focus on costs. Poor leadership can skate by, not triggering really any red flags, but the honest truth is it costs both directly and indirectly. So let me explain more. Effective leadership is crucial for business success, and this you need a degree of leadership in order to achieve anything. But poor leadership leads to a variety of negative consequences. So these consequences can include high turnover rates. High turnover rates result in disruption and increased recruitment cost. So direct disruption to the business, but also the costs associated with hiring and training a new person to do a job that you already had somebody doing. Oftentimes you see high turnover rates in places that just accept high turnover rates, call centers and the like. They're high pressure jobs and the like, but you can often see in a lot of places really well run call centers have much lower turnover rates. And they also have career progression. And even when there is career progression offered, a lot of people will stay in their job because they know they like their existing team and they want to stay with their existing team. Those things you could put a dollar value on if you want to. You can get an actuary in and you can find out exactly how much that's saving the organization. But inflated salary expectations, in a lot of times I've seen businesses with inadequate leadership spending higher salaries to retain talent. Now, this is also followed up by a decrease in employee engagement. So you're spending more to retain that talent, but your best people are disengaged and underperforming. Like, employee disengagement reduces productivity and innovation. You have a situation where you have decreased customer satisfaction because even your best employees are underperforming. If I could put it in one way or another, if you have poor leadership, you have a Formula One team that is spending really well to get the best car on the track, but is trying desperately to save money on the engineering team and the driver. The engineering team, the pit crew team, whoever you could fire, whoever you could hire at the local, outside the local Costco or hardware house, and the driver is a guy who was really good at go-karts. Yeah, might be really good at go-karts, but if he hasn't stepped up through the ranks and figured out how to drive a Formula One car, he might know the craft at a basic level, but be underperforming. Again, if you're running a go-kart team, you can put a Formula One driver in there. He's not going to be incredibly happy unless he's being challenged for new and exciting things. Again, you could have the pit crew team from McLaren. They're going to do excellent work at a go-kart track, but they're not going to be inspired to keep going. You need to give them challenges requisite to their experience level. But at the same time, these guys work incredibly well. And you know why? Because they have to. Because they have chosen to be there. They're paid very well, but they work very well. And they are led very well. They know exactly what their mission is. They know exactly what they have to do. They do these things. And why do they do them? Because they know what they have to do, and they're all pulling in the same direction. The driver, the engineering team, the pit crew, the pit boss, everyone who is part of that team, and there are a cast of hundreds, everyone down to the guy who orders the tires knows what the job is. The job is to get that car, fractions of a second faster so that they can win races and they can win championships. It's nice to win races. It's better to win championships. So in terms of that, they all know where they're going. But can you imagine if you had poor leadership in any one of those aspects? If you had a poor pit crew who was underperforming, it's going to cost everyone. And it can cost the jobs of everyone. It can be millions of dollars down the drain because one guy just didn't feel it that day. And that's just not acceptable. These guys know they're working with some incredible athletes. Anyway, I digress. So overall poor leadership leads to a decline in business performance, and we can see that, okay? So this compounds year on year, and this should be noted as the largely unseen cost, and rarely does a business register the lost sales, the costs they failed to reduce, the productivity they didn't actually achieve. More than anything else listed, this has to have the largest effect on the financials, but it pales into insignificance compared to the next item in terms of actual impact. And the next item I have here is a toxic work environment and poor culture. Where you have an absence of leadership or poor leadership, you will frequently have a toxic work environment and poor culture. Now, oddly enough, you can find some very successful businesses that have toxic parts of their business. A lot of banks have trading floors that are incredibly toxic. You just have to read some of the books from the old traders that have retired from these places, and banks can have toxic places to work. But that's not necessarily a poor culture for that aspect of the business. But when you have both a toxic workplace and a poor culture, then you have the thing that will damage a business. So failure to prioritize leadership development will often foster a toxic work environment. So where the people are stuck in their roles and they can't move on or up, and they don't want to because the money's so good where they are. But they will become toxic. They will become toxic towards other people in the business, other parts of the business, and poor culture can result from that. And your poor culture can result in poor transparency, a lack of empathy towards others in the business and outside, so customers included, and poor accountability amongst the leadership team. In a former life, I was an auditor, right? And a damn good one. And the biggest red flag for auditors wasn't the numbers. It wasn't checking the controls. It was that there might be a bad culture or a toxic environment. So even if we didn't find a breakdown in controls, we knew things were bad when the culture is mindless zombies who can't wait to be anywhere but work, and or people who want to be elsewhere but will do whatever the boss says without question. They'll be there all the time without fail. And why did you do that? Well, XYZ told me to. My boss told me to do it this way, so that's the way I do it. Or my boss said I need to do X. That was a red rag to a bull, because your boss has a certain authority, yes. But is there a process? Is there a procedure? Is there a manual somewhere that says this is how you should do your role? Is there a control in place, or is it you do whatever this guy says? Or this girl, this is my boss, I do whatever they say, without question. Now, that can be a really good environment in a combat situation, but it's a terrible environment in a business situation because people can have bad moments. People can have bad decisions. And if your team aren't willing to push back and say, hey, boss, no, we're not doing that. Or can you explain perhaps why we're doing this instead of maybe this much better idea? If people aren't willing to do that, or they've done that in the past, been shut down brutally, or seen people fired because of questioning ideas, then they just won't. You'll see no innovation, you'll see a very poor culture, and you'll see a toxic work environment, the starts of a toxic work environment where people will want out of your organization at all costs. So what do we do? Well, there's a couple of things we can do. Invest in leadership training and create a leadership path. So investing in leadership training can mitigate the costs associated with poor leadership and improve results across the organization, lowering costs, growing revenue, all the stuff that you want to do. Creating a culture where employees feel valued and supported is crucial for sustainable growth. Without the proper culture, businesses underperform and Band-Aid solutions just won't help. Okay? So now this isn't a revelation. It's not news to people who know. Okay? This is not the podcast to say, hey, I've never heard this before. Because if you haven't and you've never experienced negative, poor culture or a toxic work environment, kudos to you. It's rife. In the real world, we know where it is, and we should be calling it out. And I don't mean people who are male chauvinist pigs. I mean anyone who is creating an environment that is adverse to your team creating the best environment for themselves where they can win. So I guess people who work in people and culture, parts of organizations that like work on people and culture, the HR departments and the like, they rightly are aware of the importance of culture. They are also aware that leadership is necessary to drive and maintain a positive culture. But it's hard. I won't lie to you, it's hard, and it's hard to change culture. It's hard to get leaders to stand up and lead. So why should we do the hard thing when we can coast by on our coattails and just say, well, it's working okay? And because we're not managing and measuring all of the things that it's failing to achieve, we're not measuring all of those savings we failed to get, sales we failed to get, the turnover that is too high and what that's costing our business in both sales and in fact culture. So the more people that leave, the more people that are likely to leave. So what happens when it all goes wrong? Well, the popular and obvious example remains in the press today. Boeing. And Boeing has been experiencing problems for years. And we're now hearing of cultural problems that have been existing for near decades in the organization. And it's now an enormous problem at Boeing. Failure of leadership has resulted in huge cultural issues. It may well destroy the entire business. You can't bring in a cost-cutting expert to fix this. To fix Boeing, it needs to be a leader who will focus on providing direction at all levels of the organization to follow. But many of the existing executives and management at all levels will need to be let go. And in order to achieve a new vision and a direction for the organization and maintain and achieve profitability again, win back customer approval, and refocus on quality, the existing team who have led cost-cutting and have argued at every turn against the focus on quality can't be the people that will lead the organization back to profitability. It's one of those things. People will tolerate a lot of things. They won't tolerate a hypocrite. So years of focus on cost over safety and reputation demands significant numbers of heads. It just does. And they will roll. Either they make these changes now or the entire business may well fail. And investors know this, and so does the board. And the board knows it's them on the chopping block. So how do you avoid that fate? How do you avoid the fate of Boeing? Well, the first and most important and possibly only step is listen to the feedback that you're getting from your team. Lead, create the direction and invest in training for your staff to lead. Like, you need to get leadership at all levels in your organization. People need to become the best they can be where they are so that they can lead from their own position. It's not just management who lead. People at all levels in the organization lead. And your job as a leader is to create the environment where everyone thrives. And if you need to do that, well, you definitely need to do that as soon as you can. And I know this all sounds simple, but if you truly want to know more, reach out to David or myself at Color4 Solutions for a no-obligation chat. We can walk you through how this will work, and the sooner you start, the easier it will be. So that's all for today's episode of Ask Better Questions. I have rambled a bit, and I hope you found these insights valuable and actionable. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, like and subscribe, but more importantly, share it with somebody who you feel needs to hear it. Okay? I'll be back next week with more. Until then, keep asking better questions, and remember, leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. Take care, and I'll see you back here next week.